Hello everybody and welcome to this video titled The Best 10 Stocks in My Portfolio, and by the best I mean also the number one positions in my portfolio, which is why I've added many of the stocks that I cover on the channel as well as Bitcoin. If you follow my channel, you know Bitcoin is my bond alternative. And I cover a lot of stocks on this channel, and I have a lot of positions in a lot of different stocks, actually more than 30 different stocks. But position sizing is kind of something that I've learned over time, and really there is a difference between owning stocks because it's a hobby, and stocks are my hobby. I love stocks, and so there are stocks, sometimes I'll put 0.5% on a stock because it's a hobby, and I'm aware of the limitations of that hobby. And then you also have position sizing, right? Position sizing really matters. And Tesla, with the recent run, for example, Tesla is more than 30% of my portfolio. Bitcoin is pretty close to Tesla in my portfolio. So I have a portfolio where more than half depend on Tesla and Bitcoin, which then allows me to also own more speculative positions, like I said, 0.5% positions. And these 0.5% positions I present typically in my Friday videos, the most undervalued stock videos. But I have about 10 positions that are meaningful, that are substantial enough where, if they were to go to zero, it would hurt. That's essentially the definition of the spreadsheet. Like, I own these stocks to the point that if any of these stocks were to go to zero, it would really hurt. And so let me just walk you through each of the stocks in the spreadsheet. And these are the stocks that I consider the best in my portfolio, the best positions. And I put Bitcoin in there with MicroStrategy being a proxy for that stock. But of course, owning it in pure form is often the most recommended way to do it. So let me just, first of all, walk us through why hypergrowth. So why do I own hypergrowth stocks? If you follow all of these names, many of them you may have not heard of. Well, maybe you haven't heard of them because these products are hypergrowth stocks. The products that these stocks sell are still early on in their adoption stage, and they're not mainstream, right? It's not Apple, or it's not Adobe or Google. No, it's stocks that are still getting adopted. But really briefly, why do I focus on hypergrowth? Well, what I mean by hypergrowth is I want revenue growth to be very high, and typically more than 30% for the foreseeable future is what I look for. And I added this here. This is next 7 year, next 3 years, next 7 years, next 3 years. I had on this spreadsheet how long I estimate that these stocks will grow for. And so, for example, Tesla has famously guided a few years back for 50% growth in deliveries for the next 10 years, right? So I use that as the long-term guidance. So I want the stocks to grow really fast. The reason why I want to grow the stocks to grow really fast is because in my world, in the world of Beat the Denominator, the name of the channel, the denominator is the US dollar. And the US dollar is getting diluted very, very, very fast. And if you look at the US dollar, this is one of the early videos that I made on the channel talking about what's happening with the US dollar. It's pretty much everything we value: our energy, our time, our labor, stuff, our homes, everything we value is divided by the US dollars, by how many US dollars there are out there. And of course, there's many, many more US dollars because commercial banks, whenever they issue loans, the money is created. It's new money supply. So new money comes into the economy through the modern banking system and the reserve banking system. And so money is not backed by anything but trust. Money is fiat, i.e. it is backed by trust or force. And what do we mean? What do we mean by fiat? Or at least what is the issue with that? Of course, is that the money stock grows really, really fast. So there's more and more dollars out there. And actually, if you track how many dollars there are out there to say the price of real estate or the price of the S&P 500, you realize that it hasn't moved, right? If the price of your real estate or the price of your S&P 500 has barely moved because it's done, in the past, maybe 7 or 8%. More recently, real estate and real assets have gone up in value way more because they've increased the money supply. But it's all linked, in my view of the world of economics, it's all linked to how many dollars are out there. If you have $100 and next year you also have $100 and there's 15% more dollars, you've just lost 15%. Congratulations. That's the whole point. And that's because the truly scarce, truly desirable goods typically are not included in the mainstream inflation metrics like the CPI, things like really high-end property or things like a real vacation. That's not included in all of this stuff. And that grows much faster than the CPI, which is at 2 or 3%. So that's why I use this as my ultimate proxy for inflation. And if you follow this, if you follow the inflation world, you may tell me, oh, well, look, the M2 money stock has been declining for the past month. It's declining again. It went back up during the BTFP program to save Silicon Valley banks that they've put in place. The truth is, the M2 money stock, the one that everybody comments on, is small, and is going to be smaller in comparison to euro dollars. Euro dollars are this very opaque dollar system that exists fully outside of the United States, but those euro dollars, dollar banking outside of the US, makes its way back to the US through international commerce. So euro dollars matter perhaps even more than M2 money stock, and we have very little to no data on euro dollars, which is why I keep this stake in the ground that 15% is what your portfolio needs to do in order to not sink to inflation. One will seek to inflation the way I define it, if there is not 15%. And that's why I consider 15% to be a 0% real return. And you will understand now why these stocks are the stocks that I focus on. Because let's take the triple Q, right? The QQQ is the proxy for the stocks that pretty much nobody disagrees on, like Amazon or Google or Apple or Facebook, right? The QQQ is made up mostly of these stocks. Well, the triple Q over the past 10 years, the NASDAQ, i.e. all of the tech stocks, all of the big tech stocks, their average return was 18%, 18.81%. So if you look at it in nominal terms, that's really nice, 18%. That's wonderful. But if you actually look at it the way I look at it, I remove the 15% monetary inflation, and I get a 3.8% return on the NASDAQ in real terms. And sure enough, if you take the performance of the NASDAQ and look at, say, the price of your dream house, and how much value your dream house has taken, your dream house has likely tripled or quadrupled in price over the past 4 years. The NASDAQ did just about that, maybe a little more, equaling to like a 3 or 4% return, real return, which is not enough for me to get out of bed. Which is why I have to go more on the edge of innovation and look at stocks that not everybody agrees on. The poster child of a stock that not everybody agrees on, for example, is Tesla. Tesla, if you actually look at the average annual return of Tesla over the past 10 years, it was 53% ARR. Therefore, you remove 15% to the 53% of Tesla, you're getting a 38% real return on Tesla. Now, that's real performance. Acquiring Tesla allows you to get more house, even if the price of that dream house keeps going up with monetary inflation. It still allows you to outpace that monetary inflation and get that house or that desirable asset, i.e. that vacation, that very expensive surgery, whatever one considers to be valuable and rare. And that is why I have very little choice. I would love to tell you how much I love Google, and I do like Google, but that's not going to beat the denominator. To me, stocks that are going to beat the denominators, they're going to be closer to the edge of innovation, and they are going to have characteristics of product adoption. So in conclusion, why hypergrowth? Because I have no choice. There's tons of stocks. but I can't buy them. And I believe that if a firm, right, if a firm's revenue growth does not exceed 15% a year, to me it is drowning. It is drowning in all of that inflation. Firms need to at least capture 15% more dollars, otherwise they are drowning. And a firm needs to capture that baseline of $2 issued each year. If they don't, they're not staying afloat, and only hyper growth stock can do that, which gets me on to the second reason for these stocks. You'll notice they're all very innovative companies. You won't find a bank in there. You won't find any legacy old world financially engineered stocks, i.e. they go buy back stocks and they're very clever in the way they do it and they issue debt to buy back stocks. You won't find any of this stock because financial engineering or astute management goes a long way up to the point, and it may help you catch up with monetary inflation, i.e. achieve 15%, but it's not going to help you beat it, in my view. It's not going to help you beat it. So again, I have no choice but to look at revenue growth. Why? Because I view sales as a proxy for adoption here, right? Sales don't lie, earnings lie. I mean, you can choose how you manage your capex, your operating expenses, all of that. You can choose in order to maximize earnings, do layoffs to maximize earnings, all of that stuff. You can do that with earnings, but sales don't lie. Sales are a true proxy for adoption. And I have to look at sales because to me, the only companies that are going to grow fast enough are those companies whose products are taking over the world. And when you have a company that grows at more than 30%, or say some companies growing at 50% a year, you have a clear demonstration from that company that you have 50% more spend. If people decided to spend 50% more on whatever that company sells this year than they did last year. And it very, very, very quickly compounds. Revenue growth is a proxy for adoption, and it is a proxy for my style of investing, because obviously we've known for 100 plus years how product adoption works, right? And typically, if you look, like for example, if you look at the iPhone will really fit that. The iPhone is clearly around here, where it's waning, it's fading, right? People who are going to get an iPhone already have an iPhone, right? Tesla is around here. Very few people have Tesla. Actually, in the US, it's 4.5%. There's going to be way more people that have Teslas in the future than there are right now. That's why product adoption for Tesla is coming, but product adoption for Apple, it's not coming. Apple is just being stable and now trading on the basis of PE ratios and buybacks, but not necessarily trading on the future, trading on how much they're going to be in the future. All of these stocks are showing signs of early adoption. These products are getting early adopted. They're nowhere near where they could be. And product adoption also has a dimension of technology, i.e. products get adopted when they are so much better. And for all of these stocks that I have in this spreadsheet, they have many things that make them so much better than legacy. Only, and that's the concept of Peter Thiel's book, right? 0 to 1. You will make the switch only when a product is 10 times better, right? If a product is just 10% or 20% better, customers are not going to switch. It requires energy to switch, right? You're comfortable. Take the case of Airbnb. I've been going to the hotel for the past 30 years. I know how hotels work. I'm comfortable. There has to be a very compelling case as to why you would go to an Airbnb. And more people are realizing how compelling Airbnbs are, and so they're switching to Airbnb. Same is true for e-commerce. Same is true for endpoint security and for all of these stocks that I'm going to go through briefly. But just keep in mind that in their adoption curve, these companies are right here, right in the early adopter. So much of the revenue growth is coming their way. And since much of the revenue growth is coming their way, they have a shot at capturing more of these newly issued US dollars that get issued all the time by the banking system. And why do I not focus on price to earnings ratio? Well, because by the time price to earnings ratio start to matter and mean something, I'll likely be out of that stock. because that means that product adoption is not ahead of it. That's also why I want companies to do marketing and promote their product and make sure the products get adopted, because that's how you trigger that beginning of a curve, which is always exponential. The beginning of an S curve is always exponential. So let me go briefly through some of these stocks, right? So why Tesla? Tesla, more than 30% of my portfolio is Tesla. It's a huge position for me. Like I said, it would really hurt if Tesla was to fail. It would really hurt. But why Tesla, right? Because electric is revolutionizing cars. Done calculations on the channel, between 7 and 13 times cheaper per mile driven an electric car. So you have a 10x improvement, right? Filling up your gas tank, proverbial gas tank, with electricity at home is what? $7 to $8 to fill up your Tesla at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 12 cents a kilowatt hour. That's 10x cheaper. Now, if it drives itself, which is kind of a promise that a lot of people who hold that stock does, then is it another order of magnitude better? So not only does it drive itself, but it's also 10 times cheaper. So does that mean the new car, the modern day car, does that mean it's 100 times better than the old car? And so are you likely to make the switch for a car that would be 100 times better? What if you're into sports, right? Nothing accelerates faster than a sports car. So you can get the thrill of a Lamborghini for the price of a, Tesla Model, 3 performance, long range anyways. You probably know what I mean, or you get a very similar experience. So that's the concept of a 10x better, and people switch to 10x betters. And we're past the 5% adoption threshold in most countries for EVs and for Teslas. And therefore, to me, it's likely that this product will get adopted. They are the uncontested leader. And when you look at the performance chart of Tesla and 2022 with the Fed raising rates was the end of a world, and so it looks like an impressive decline, but it's not. When you go back 10 years, Tesla performed at 53% in nominal, which leads it to 38% return. Tesla has been an outstanding stock to own, and given the fact that right now their market share is about 5%, I see much adoption coming. And if they go to from 5% to say 25%, that's a 5x. That's a 5x adoption in the product. And they have more products. And anyways, I wonder if there's any Tesla channels out there on YouTube. I'm not sure I've seen any, but anyways, moving on. Why Enphase? So Enphase. Let me move on to Enphase. So Enphase is kind of similar. It's a similar story to Tesla, but Enphase is a revolution in the electric space, but it's focusing on residential solar. Residential solar is the cheapest source of energy, right? You put solar panels on your roof, which are a commodity, mostly Chinese made. They're very inexpensive, and they produce 7 to 9 times your energy needs. And the residential solar is getting adopted exponentially in Europe already at 10% in the European Union. You walk in a neighborhood in the EU, you likely see 10% of a single-family home roofs that have solar on it. In the US, it's 4%. It's just the beginning of adoption. Why Enphase? Why do I bet on Enphase? Well, I don't want to bet on solar panels because they're a commodity. I never see someone tell me I want to buy a Jinhua solar panel rather than a Huawei or LG Chem. I prefer anyways. They're a commodity. Nobody really cares about solar panels. But people care a lot about your system. And really, Enphase, in my view, is the best system, although Solar Edge, which tends to be a little more popular in Europe, is the other side of that duopoly. And so really, you have a sort of a duopoly between Enphase and Solar Edge. I believe Enphase as the superior technology, and that's why I think Enphase is doing better. But one could not be faulted to own either, in my view, because if you look at the returns, if you were to compare both returns of these stocks, pretty similar, although Enphase is a little bit ahead. And when you compare to Enphase, right, to tell you about revolutions and how true revolutions can be, right? This is product adoption. Like I said, 4% in the US. We're just beginning. Look at the returns, compare the returns compared to Tesla, 43% to 47%. Granted, this is an old screenshot, but still extremely high return for Enphase. Nothing to be unsatisfied with, 47, 42. Very stunning return for Enphase. And Enphase is my number 3 position. Again, if Enphase were to go to 0, it would hurt in the portfolio. So there's some costly signal from me telling you that I own Enphase. Moving on to HIMS. So HIMS is the most micro cap in all of these stocks out there. HIMS is a stock that I've recently been allocating to and recently fell in love with that stock. Really, what I love about HIMS is a very quick adoption of their product, and they're trying to revolutionize healthcare. They're trying to create this healthcare that is going to be the future of healthcare. In my view, at least that's what they're trying to do. So it's a system that's tech-driven, right? You take an app, you see a provider on an app. It's personalized medication, right? It's a mix of a pharmacy and the doctor together. They send you personalized medication after you've met with a doctor on your app. It's fully digital, so they have a concept of a flywheel. They learn from customers what has worked, what has not worked in the past, and they improve their medication. They improve the consultation, detection of illnesses, anything like that. They improve it digitally. It's preventative. They focus on catching any issues you may have, health issues you may have early on, so it doesn't get really, really bad. And because of all of these reasons, right, leveraging tech, personalized, digital, preventive, because of all of these reasons, it is therefore low cost, and it is so cheap. It's actually much cheaper than copays in general, especially in the case of ED drugs, for example, which is still their number one product and the product they got started with. They're cheaper than copays, which is absolutely insane. And healthcare is going to be disrupted, in my view. Healthcare is a major sector, huge sector, sitting right next to real estate, right next to cars, huge sector, and it cannot disrupt itself, right? Disruption cannot come from the inside of the healthcare world. To me, disruption will come from an outsider, and my bet is that HIMS is one of these bigger outsiders that has a shot at disrupting healthcare. And it also helps that it's very cheap. And if you want to talk my video, see my video where I talk specifically about valuations, you can look at my Friday videos when I look at the valuation of all of the stocks that I cover on the channel and or own. Let me move on to Palantir. So Palantir, I put in my best 10 stocks video. First of all, it's a big position for me. And I've been thinking a lot about the big data space, and should it be MongoDB? Should it be Palantir? Should it be Snowflake? Should it be Datadog? Even though Datadog is in a slightly similar situation, and I own all of these stocks. Palantir is still the bigger position for me, and the reason why I own Palantir, there's a few of them. But first of all, the CEO is on the record. He's previously guided 30% growth over the next decade. Okay, under pressure, he lowered a little bit that guidance, but that's still what he guided. And when I look at a company like Palantir, there's a lot of fuss about their commercial product and whether it's good, whether it's not good. What's the difference with Snowflake? Is it getting adopted or not? But there is almost no fuss on their AI software, Gotham, for the military and for the Western world in general. And so I believe that this company will continue to be adopted. If it becomes a main military contractor, I have no issue seeing the market cap of this company being much bigger. And I also cannot forget the association of Palantir with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is the disruptor in chief, right? Founded PayPal along with Elon Musk, right? Joined PayPal and Elon Musk. They're part of the PayPal mafia. All these great entrepreneurs are part of the PayPal mafia, and they follow these concepts of creating a product that's 10x better to drive adoption. And the fact that Palantir was founded by Peter Thiel gives me a lot of confidence in the ability of that company, and that's one of the main positions that I have in my top 5. Moving on to CrowdStrike. Sorry about that. Moving on to CrowdStrike. So CrowdStrike is my cybersecurity play. And if you notice in this best 10 stock, I try to have it as diversified as I can. So CrowdStrike, the reason why I love CrowdStrike is the CEO gave an impressive 3-year out annual recurring revenue guidance. And actually that would equal to about 35% revenue growth for the next 3 years, which is well above my 30% threshold. CrowdStrike is getting adopted by enterprises all around the world. What does CrowdStrike do? They're an AI-fed endpoint security system, colloquially referred to as an antivirus generally. And it's relying on the largest network of computers to feed its AI. So what CrowdStrike does is, since it has the freshest data, because it is set up on the most computers, whenever there is a threat detected on a computer somewhere, i.e. an endpoint, CrowdStrike communicates that threat to the entire network. So the network provides a tremendous moat against any competitor that may want to attack CrowdStrike, because they were the first to do it and they have the top solution. So in my view, CrowdStrike will win because they have the most data. That's my view slash my hope. Because like I said, if CrowdStrike were to fail, it would hurt too. But I've made a few videos on CrowdStrike on the channel. Feel free to look at them. I mean, it's a very solid company that has had a very meteoric rise in the AI field and AI space. Let me move on to Mercado Libre. So Mercado Libre, to me, the analogy I would have is like buying Amazon or Alibaba, 7. And we should most likely refer to Mercado Libre more as a Alibaba comparison than an Amazon comparison, because remember, Amazon is so big because of the cloud. Mercado Libre does not have the cloud. Mercado Libre, however, has a successful fintech. It's got a growing ad business, just like Amazon. It's got impressive growth. It's the leader in Latin America. They've done very well in Latin America. And if you look at their past return over the past 13 years, they've done 27% ARR over the past 13 years. So you're still well over the 15%, but not quite what I look for. What I look for is typically 30% ARR. But if you actually go before the crash, right, before the end of the world Fed raising rate 2022 crash, if you go before that crash, they were well anchored into the 35% plus ARR over 11 years. And I believe this is a company that has much runway for growth still left, and it's a high quality management company, very good management. So Mercado Libre would be one of my top 10 positions. Let me move on to StoneCo. So StoneCo is my second smallest position in this set of companies that I'm showing here. StoneCo, I would put it as like buying Square in 2014, but for pennies on the dollars. They have a Square of Brazil, keeping in mind that Brazil is much reliant on a lot of small business, and so they have a very unique way to sell. They set up these community stores to sell to a lot of small businesses who use the StoneCo terminal payment to have people pay at their store, and they also do a little bit of a QuickBooks to help stores, and it's actually a darling stock of both Warren Buffett and Cathie Wood. They both own the stock. One of them because it's a true value. The stock is extremely cheap per my spreadsheet. Another one is because it's a high growth stock. So rare to see those two in a stock. There's impressive adoption, and they are in Brazil with a quasi monopoly, only with PagSeguro being the competitor. And I prefer StoneCo over PagSeguro. I've made a full video about that on the channel as well. Let me move on to Nubank. So Nubank, same, is again a Latin America stock. It's a neobank in Latin America. They have little competition or inertia from legacy bank where they operate, say Brazil and Mexico. And also they have a lot of new demand, right? People who have never banked before begin to bank with a neobank. And so that allows companies like Nubank to leapfrog and really grow fast, in my view. Why did I choose, and this is a question, why did I choose Nubank over SoFi here? Well, I've grown wary of the SoFi association with student loans. I think it creates a big overhang on the stock, but SoFi is actually a pretty close position to my Nubank. I've increased my position in Nubank recently quite a bit. So I see those two as a pair in general, but SoFi, the student loan association, I'm fearful. I'm fearful something's going to happen with the student loans where, they're going to be extended or something like that, even though I know they passed a law. But if you go to the 9 times the moratoria was extended, it was supposed to end. So anyways, that's why I'm a little worried. That's why I chose Nubank for my portfolio. I also see Latin America as a very adequate emerging market for myself. As a Westerner, I was born and raised in Europe and living in the US now. So to me, I see my ability to understand Latin America as an emerging market to being very able. I think I'm very able to do that. much different it would be for, say, investing in India or in China or in Africa. And so I'm much more confident having my emerging market exposure being to Latin America. One of the reasons for that, though, why have emerging market exposure at all in the portfolio? Well, it's because that's where you find explosive growth most of the time, right? There's a lot of opportunities that have happened in the US that are no longer available because the US was pursuing these opportunities 10 years earlier, right? Take the example of StoneCo or even Mercado Libre, right? E-commerce was booming in the 2010s. Square was booming in the 2010s. Now it's booming in Latin America. So I want to have the product adoption curve in Latin America when that product adoption curve in the US maybe halfway through, if not done, in the case of point of sale payment system, if not done. Let me move on to Airbnb. So why Airbnb? Well, I own Airbnb because I believe hotels have never ever been disrupted. They've never seen disruption like Airbnb is coming. And so a lot of people do not understand hotels. There's also a lot of fear on Airbnb. Whenever a city bans an Airbnb or does a moratorium on Airbnbs, it gets a fair share of the headlines, but it's missing the forest for the trees, right? It's like you have a few major cities that are banning them, but that does not mean that this is the case around the world, and that does not mean that cities will win. Remember what happened with Uber and Lyft, right? They were banning them too. How did that go for New York City trying to ban Uber? Didn't go too well. But Airbnb is just a superior solution, in my view. It's a superior business, which is why I think it will get adopted, because you're exploiting pre-existing capital, right? Houses that are already built, apartments that are already built. And by exploiting that capital, you're actually creating value of something that's already there, which means that Airbnb can grow really, really fast. Think about a hotel. The only way a hotel can grow is build a new hotel. You build a hotel in, I don't know, downtown San Francisco with 1,000 rooms. Very, very, very tough to grow. Airbnb doesn't have to do that. It relies on already built capital. And Airbnb is also much bigger, I believe, than what most people think. If you listen to Brian Chesky talk about Airbnb, they're trying to disrupt the world of rental living, not just vacations. They're already disrupting vacations quite a bit, but to me, the vision is much bigger in the sense that mom-and-pop renters of single-family homes will be disrupted by Airbnb too, because Gen Zs, millennials, they love the idea of living on Airbnb or living through Airbnb, spending 4 months in one Airbnb, 3 months in another, hopping from town to town, and this is something that enables this. Airbnb is also a best cost product. It's a best cost product in 2 ways. Whenever you travel with many parties, many people, it becomes much cheaper than going to a hotel. Try to go to a hotel with a family of 5. You'll see it's really not comparable. It's really not comparable to Airbnb. Airbnb is a superior solution, and it's also a best cost solution compared to having to sign a lease. Maybe you're new to town. Maybe you just want to live a month or 2 in a neighborhood and try it out, and you don't want to sign a 1-year lease. And mom and pop rentals, most of the time, you can't find a lease less than a year. And Airbnb, lastly, is a global disruption. It's a global disruption. Airbnb is present all over the world. Even though they exited China and they exited Russia, they're still present extensively in Asia, extensively in Europe. They're the official partner of the Olympic Games in Paris. They have so much going for them. I love Airbnb. Young, driven CEO as well. And it's one of the best success stories in business. And also Airbnb, and I'll finish with this on Airbnb, it attracts quite a bit of value investors, believe it or not, because they have very high free cash flow margins. And so they have a shareholder base that's value investors too. So another stock here where value investors and growth investors agree. And I will finish with the most controversial asset for stock investors. The most controversial asset on my spreadsheet, which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is my bond alternative. I do not own bonds. I do not believe in bonds, but I do believe in having a more secure share of retirement. And I can already think in the comments people yelling at me for calling Bitcoin secure. But I believe Bitcoin is secure. It's just my opinion, no investment advice, of course. If you look over the long run, the performance, so keep in mind, this is GBTC. GBTC on average has like a 30+% discount over the real asset. And keep in mind that most Bitcoiners own Bitcoin in a brain wallet in your mind. You don't have to worry about it. You just remember 12 words, and it's forever in your head. But MicroStrategy, GBTC, or the new ETF, all of these are interchangeable in my view. They're a proxy for this new asset. And if you compare, you can see that Tesla is dwarfed by the Bitcoin, the returns of Bitcoin over the last. I don't know why this is not going past 2020. But anyways, it dwarfs it at 78%. And if you go back to the longer run, no matter what the length of time you look at, say more than 5 years, you're gonna see that the returns of Bitcoin are almost twice as high as the returns of Tesla, and therefore that would be something like 4 times the Nasdaq. So. The reason why I own Bitcoin, really briefly, it's the only asset that is not a derivative of the US dollar, right? All companies earn revenues in US dollars. Bitcoin is not a derivative of that, right? A bond is a derivative of a US dollar. A bond is a contract. I give up USD today, you give me back USD in the future with interest. That's a contract, right? Bitcoin is entirely disconnected from the US dollar in my view. It's not disconnected from energy, but it's disconnected from the US dollar. Unlike bonds, it has no counterparty risk. You store it in your mind with 12 words, and that's it. There's no counterparty risk. And it is schmuck insurance, and that's what I'll conclude this with. The Bitcoin, with its limited supply of 21 million coins, there's actually way less coins because a lot of people have lost them, but it is schmuck insurance, and this is how Shamet Palihapitiya calls it, in case the USD becomes like the Bolivar or like the Argentine peso. That gives you that schmuck insurance in the sense that you have a asset whose supply cannot be expanded. The supply of Bitcoin is fixed, and every time someone forgets their keys or messes up or just dies and decides to not pass on their Bitcoin to their heirs, the supply of Bitcoin gets decreased, and there is no way anybody can produce more Bitcoin. And if you look at Bitcoin per the adoption curve, you can see that we are closing in. We're still early. Bitcoin is perhaps the earliest asset that I have on this spreadsheet. But at one point, there will be an adoption curve for Bitcoin. That adoption curve has started in emerging nations. It is starting slowly in the developed world, quote unquote. But to me, I strongly believe in this asset. Keep in mind, this is an asset that I've followed since 2015. I used to own it in 2015. I sold it. That was a mistake, but that's a story you'll hear from a lot of people who bought Bitcoin back in those days. But I'm happy to be back in. It's the second biggest position in my portfolio, right after Tesla. But I consider it a bonds position. I don't consider it a stock position. But in the best 10 stocks portfolio, I want to put it in there because there's way to own it through stocks such as MicroStrategy or GBTC, which is a fund, and there may be an ETF coming next year. So we'll see about that. Thank you so much for watching my 10 quote-unquote best hypergrowth stock portfolio, my 10 top stocks portfolio. This is not investment advice. This is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. I appreciate your likes, appreciate your subscribes. It takes me a while to do these videos. All of your comments, all of your subscriptions, very much appreciated. Please share this video with your friends if you want. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.